Salt Memory focuses on Andy Van Din's intense additive and subtractive drawing process. These works make me think about how drawing is so foundational and personal for every artist. So I asked Andy how his relationship to drawing began. He told me that when he was a kid, his mom, who's here tonight, enrolled him in different after-school programs, one of which was a drawing class. He said it was the only extracurricular activity he did that he didn't complain about. Fast forward, and here we are, stepping into Andy's carefully composed graphite realms, which, with delicate rendering and poetic mythological adaptations, wherein sky and ground compete within the boundaries of a basketball court, and where Icarus may have grown gills. Please join me in welcoming Andy Van Din.
Thank you, Tony and Ryan. I first want to say thanks to RAiR. It's been a great experience, and I'm never going to forget this. I want to say thank you to Ryan and Justin for being great directors. I want to say thank you to my family for being really supportive. And I want to say thank you to my beautiful wife, Changi. I could not have done this without you. So here we go. I'm from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. It's like so the way I'm going to do this talk is just talk about me a little bit, things that may not be art related, but just things that I like. It might show up in my art, it might not. I'm from Calgary, Alberta, which is the Texas of Canada. Oil and gas, and there's lots of cowboys, but no one's really a cowboy. But it's a safe place to grow up. It's really cold, but it's really beautiful, and I definitely have experienced the sublime, and it's something I'm constantly chasing and something I'm constantly trying to portray in my work. Calgary is known for the Calgary Stampede, which is self-proclaimed as the greatest outdoor show in the world. But it's just it's just an excuse to get drunk and party at this point. But the motifs around the Calgary Stampede and around the myth of the cowboy in the Great West leaves little room for other representation of other people. And so for new immigrants, you're forced to accept the motifs almost right away, and almost feels like you're being stamped resettled simultaneously. That way you don't feel like a nuisance. The faster you simulate, the less problems you'll have. The only problem is, if I try to fit in, I stuck out even more. It's like even the cops wear cowboy hats, which makes it really hard to run away. It makes it really easy to run away from them. I'm not talking from experience. I grew up watching The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It's where I got my vocabulary, and I would say my style, and if I was to describe my humor, I would say it's The Fresh Prince meets Conan O'Brien. And for those of you who don't know, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air stars the guy who slapped Chris Rock. I love sci-fi TV shows. I love Lost specifically because they had no idea what they were doing every week. But that's what made it great. It was not about the end, it was just about the process. I grew up listening to hip-hop at a really early age. I learned a lot from hip-hop, not just from the lyrics and stories, but just how hip-hop was perceived. It was dismissed as a medium that could not be powerful, but I saw it in a different way. And, it was seen as violent, but here you can see Jay-Z is sharing his juice with Nas, so it's quite nice. My first intro to hip-hop was actually through the reading Rainbow. And I was probably in the third or fourth grade, and they were rapping about how cool it is to read and stay in school, and I thought it was the coolest thing. But I was more amazed by how they were walking with no shoelaces. But they just had this swagger to them that it was unbeatable at the time. Ball is life. Enough said. I didn't get the memo or they didn't get the memo how to play basketball. But basketball shows up a lot in my work, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I'm a big foodie. I love TV shows that don't just show the food, but what's off of the plate, and what happens to, a culture, and what happens to a culture that kind of reaches its way to a dish. And it's really interesting. And this is Guy Fieri, for those of you who don't know. He's the king of food. I love food so much I eat it every day. I can't live without it. My mom, she is the godfather of our family. She may look like a cute little Asian woman, but don't mess with her. But on a serious note, yeah, I get a lot of inspiration from my parents and their stories about how they came here. Whenever I was, getting in trouble or being too much, they would humble me with their stories. And it definitely is in a lot of my works. All right, now the actual presentation. My work is directly and indirectly about the Vietnamese diaspora. I say indirectly, maybe I'll speak that a little bit later, but my work, the main thing is I try to talk about this distance that's really hard to explain. There's this distance between me and Vietnam that you can measure, but there's also this untangible distance that's full of unknown desires, and that's basically the reason why I make art, is to fulfill these desires that I don't really know what they are. It's hard to explain. I use different mediums. I would say I mainly draw, and I mainly work large. So the first few pieces are large format drawings. This is a pool with a depiction of a storm. So you're kind of imagining, the viewer imagines some metaphorical space above. The diving board is awkwardly in the middle of the pool. So there is like a metaphorical space behind. You can't reach to the other side because it's against the wall. And there's a depiction of some sort of land or place on the other side. The viewer is kind of forced to shift as I shift, if that makes sense. So the drawing becomes vertical to horizontal, 2D to 3D, an object, a container, water becomes a barricade. Instead of just looking at a depiction of water, you're looking down at water. And that comes important later on. I'll explain that later on. So the way I work is I'll usually cover a sheet of paper with charcoal or pencil, or an area with charcoal and pencil, and I'll start erasing. So I work from dark to light, and it's a collection of erasure marks. And I don't usually know what it's going to look like. I just react from mark to mark. So this piece, it's kind of like you're underwater, and there's this weird form, and there's these bullets or creatures like whizzing around. And it's quite large. I don't know, maybe 15 feet. In my work, I deal with a lot of motifs of water and smoke. In water, you feel free and constricted at the same time. You feel immersed and contained. You're free and displaced. Smoke, it alters your depth and your distance. It's kind of, the way I describe it is it's like looking in a microscope. It feels so far because you're looking at something on a molecular level, like you're looking at the sky and you're looking at the stars. But in reality, you're just like a foot away from whatever you're looking at. And that distance, that tension is what I'm really interested in. I'm not necessarily interested in portraying the beauty in nature. I'm more interested in the terror, the sublime, and the calmness that comes from the terror. So this piece is, I was starting to think about semi-permeable membranes, things going in and out. And definitely inspired by my parents' stories of waves being 30, 40 feet tall. So I got a chance to go to Vietnam for the first time in 2017 on a travel grant, and my sister and mom came with me. What was quite interesting was I realized from the Western side, Vietnam was stuck in time. Nothing before, nothing after the Vietnam War. Stuck in a singular identity. And this definitely dictated my identity. I felt like I was sold a false narrative. But in reality, I am thousands of years, I'm the distillation of thousands of years of interaction. And this was something new to me, I didn't realize. And quite a quick story, like halfway into the vacation, my mom was like, "Andy, why did you take me here? I've already been here. Why didn't you take me to Europe?" So I look like I fit in Vietnam, but I don't belong there. I belong in Canada, but I don't look like I fit in. Frantz Fanon, the author of The Wretched of the Earth, he says it very eloquently. He talks about individuals without an anchor, without horizon, colorless, stateless, rootless, a race of angels. I really admire that he used the word angels. He could have used other words. I've always found it weird that the term alien is used to talk about somebody, when in reality, alien seems like a different species. Angel feels more human. So, yeah, some of us are stripped of our land, our history, our language, and we're only left with cliches to return. All I know of Vietnam are these cliches. I'm romanticizing Vietnam just as like the colonizers did. So when I make art, I'm trying to be aware. I'm quite aware of cliches, and I try not to use them. But then how do you speak of something like the Vietnam War? How do you speak of that without actually talking about it or showing it? It's quite difficult. So there's this double otherness that happens. I don't belong here, I don't belong there. There's this almost impossible return to the motherland. And it was odd. It did feel like home. It felt like with every bite of food, it felt like home. It felt like something my mom made. And this is Halong Bay. So there's like 1,000 mini islands with these mountains on it. It's quite amazing. I learned that my mom could not be near water at night. It was too much for her, especially the crashing of the waves, the sounds that the waves made. And the thing with immigrants is they have to both remember and forget at the same time. It's important to remember where you're from, but it's also important to forget, because you have to move on, you have to live your life. So these are works after the trip. This piece, I started thinking of taking sections of water, and I'll talk about this a little bit later. I feel like I keep saying that, but it'll get there. So I use palm trees as a locator, but it can mean many places. It can mean Vietnam, it can mean Hawaii, California, a place of destruction, a place of natural disaster, or a place of paradise, east or west. And so when I'm working, I'm trying to create places that I can have a relationship with no complexity. I think that's what we all want. We want to be able to just exist. The imaginary allows me to get closer to that. And through art, I'm able to make the invisible visible. And my main goal is to have these works as a proclamation of freedom. And I want to be able to not be a stranger in either place. I don't want to be a stranger in Vietnam, and I don't want to be a stranger here. I try to refuse that idea. So I started using transfer paper or carbon paper. For those of you who don't know, transfer carbon paper is what they use to transfer plans, like architects would use it to transfer plans, or seamstresses would use it to transfer clothing patterns. My mom was a seamstress and reupholsterer. So it seemed like a material that was just, I had an automatic connection to, and it seemed oddly familiar. So what I do is, I usually don't show the copy or the original. I only show the transfer paper, the tool of transitioning, translating, transferring. It becomes a metaphor for limbo, the state of in-between. So this would be an example of the copy. So I've never shown this, but these marks are made by applying pressure to the carbon paper and the carbon being released off onto the paper, and you're left with these ghostly lines. So, basketball shows up in my work basically just because I love basketball, but also I love how sports, you rely on your enemy to become better. I love how most sports you're trying to get to the other side, and a court is used as a way to locate yourself and others, and as a tool for measuring. And if you're smart enough, you can bend the rules You can move around screens and whatnot. So I usually try to incorporate clothing patterns. So maybe that's like, here's a better image where you can see clothing patterns kind of being collected together, and it becomes like a record of play, a record of labor. It becomes skin, it becomes clothes, it becomes 2D to sculptural. It becomes about transferring and translating. The size, I try to make these pieces large because I like to have things be two things. If something's heavy, I want it to be ephemeral. If something's monumental, I want it to be delicate. And that way, the viewer is forced to shift as I shift. So, just like the unknown distance, I feel like when I make work, it becomes almost a failure of creating a language. It's a constant search for the unknown, but how do you talk about that? So every piece becomes almost a failure to communicate that, especially without using cliches. So this is maybe a better example of the copy. And usually I just work on a piece of paper. I go in blind. I don't know where things are. So things interact with each other in unexpected ways and overlap and interfere with each other. So a friend of mine, we were invited to design a monument for Calgary for the Vietnamese people. And we thought our design would be people looking down instead of looking up. When you're looking up at a monument, it feels like you're praising something. We wanted people to look down and be in a position of mourning. So this is a maquette. So the whole idea was, if you imagine cutting a section of the ocean, and that would become a synecdoche, a part of something that would represent the whole. So we wanted people to imagine the massiveness and the expanse of the ocean and how hard it would be to travel. And this shows up in a lot of my work. When I don't know what to do, I'll start with this. So you can see it in this piece, for example. And then this is the first time I showed the copy or the transfer. And I added charcoal to it. And I like the idea of having to show this somewhere and then having to show the transfer paper somewhere else. And here I'm starting to look at the sky and space. There's stars, and looking at space and the sky as the unknown. So here, this is a more clear of the use of transfer paper. There would be the clothing pattern, and then underneath the transfer paper, and then I'd transfer it onto something. So this was at MacDowell, and I brought just canvas. I didn't bring any paper, which I normally work on. And I realized, oh, you can draw on canvas, you can paint on canvas. You can also cut canvas and embroider. So I learned how to hand embroider, and I would work on both sides simultaneously. So both sides would interfere with each other, and things would be going in and out. So this is the back side or the front side. And in many cases, I try not to think about finishing work. I try to just keep going and never have the goal of actually finishing it. And this fits my style, like graffiti or tattoos. I really love Cy Twombly, so making like an infinite mess really intrigues me. But it's also a way for me to not think of the final product. It just becomes what it becomes. So this piece, I was thinking it would be like a sport banner, and I wanted to pay homage and respect to my mom. So this is her name, and her name means eternal or phoenix. So there's like an infinity sign, and it would be like, if an athlete retires their jersey, they would have their number and their name. And everything's hand embroidered. So I would cut into it, and then I would try and mend things back. So I don't know if you can see it, but there's like impression of where I cut, and then I try to stitch it back to where it was before. This is the piece in the Frost Museum. I wish it was lower. Ideally, it would be not as high. So I started making, I call them family shields, because we never had a family shield, and I was always jealous of the kids in elementary school who said they had these cool family shields. I learned now they're all fake, but so I thought I'd make my own version. So there's like a banh mi, and there's the Calgary Flames logo and the cowboy hat. Thank you. Hoi. I mean, she'd be better at it. I don't speak Vietnamese. Oh, Cy Twombly is an artist. He's known for looking like, his work looks like a kid did it, but a kid couldn't do it. Yeah, he's just an artist. Yeah.
Have you ever shown your transfers and your copies together? I'm very much a process person, so I think
Right. So I haven't shown the transfers and copies together, basically because I don't know how to make it work, because it feels too direct, or maybe not direct. There's nothing wrong with direct, but maybe too literal. It's too fast of a read. Maybe if the space was large enough where I could have one on there. But I've thought about it. I'm not saying I won't ever.
takes the mystery away, maybe.
Yeah, definitely.
I was also thinking about like the planning a lot, and also because you mentioned a few times like that you kind of you're almost like setting it up so that you don't know where it's going, and it's like there's a whole plan in order to not have a plan. But also like some of the things that really stand out to me that I think are super cool and interesting are like the like really structured elements that come in, like, and they start maybe a little more random with like the grid of different pieces of paper coming together and making like art
Right,
on horizontal lines, and then like to me that sort of like really like deliberately translated into the basketball court.
right.
But I'm wondering like if there's a cool story there that that's something that you've internalized or thought about that as you progress through these.
I mean, I always just start with a single sheet thinking it's just going to stay on the sheet, and then it gets bigger. And eventually it gets too big that I can't work on it in the studio. And definitely the grid was something I thought about. It was an accidental, like the grids are used to locate, right, and find yourself. So it seemed fitting. I also really love Kerry James Marshall, the painter, and he actually folds his paintings because he has so many. It's just easier to store. But his paintings are so great, you don't notice the folds. But also, it works. It just works as a grid, and grids are cool. Yeah. Yes.
You said that your work is like influenced by graffiti, right? Did you ever go tagging or like did you have a tag?
Yeah, I did. Um, I would also like put stickers around. I would make stickers. I did bio for 3 years before I did art, and half the time I was just making stickers in class, and then just sticking them anywhere, and then definitely tagging using markers and stuff. And it's funny because I haven't thought about tagging in so long, but a coworker of mine is a big tagger, and sometimes we'll go out in New York, and he'll just tag things, and it seems so immature. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, stick it to the man. Why not? You know. So tagging might be something I might go back to. Who knows? Yeah.
Did you have like a specific tag? Can you share with us?
I struggled with that. I probably did. I don't remember what it looked like. I'll have to go back to the drawing board on that for sure. Yeah. But my stickers, a lot of them would be like these goofy ghost figures.
I remember seeing your tags in our house.
Oh yeah.
I have a question about some of the work in your show tonight. It's got like two different times on the lower right-hand side.
Yeah.
What's the significance of it?
It's almost like the use of the palm trees. The times indicate the sunrise and sunset, but it depends where you are, right? So I looked up where the sunrise, sunsets in Vietnam, in Calgary, in New York, in Roswell, in different years, in different months. Yeah.
What does the salt have to do with, maybe I missed it, but the explanation about, it's called salt memory?
Yeah, I mean, for the show, I was thinking of salt as the ocean, and that's basically it. The ocean as salt, the taste of salt in the air. Because I've lived in Calgary, Alberta, it's so landlocked. And also living here, I was imagining the ocean evaporating, and all that's left would be salt.
Tell us about your eraser.
Oh, okay. So I use a kneaded eraser. So it can form into different, for those of you who don't know, a kneaded eraser almost looks like a malleable clay that you can, rip and twist, and I'll take the shape of that. So I would get these weirdly, oddly shaped eraser marks. And that's how I get these organic forms. Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. Oh, yeah,
Great. One last one.
of course.
You mentioned experiencing the sublime a couple times, and I'm definitely not asking you to tell us about something that you don't feel comfortable talking about if you don't want to. But I am curious, like, if there's a story to the experience.
I think the most interesting time, or the biggest moment I've experienced the sublime was when I was on the Golden Gate Bridge, and I decided to walk on the Golden Gate Bridge, and I went really early, but I didn't know that it closed and opened at a certain time. So I was there really early, and I had to wait, and I was the first one on the bridge, and the only one, and it was really foggy. So it felt like the bridge was like thousands of feet in the air. It felt like with every step, the bridge was gonna fall. It was really, it was terrifying actually, but at the same time, sublime. Yeah. So I would say that's the biggest moment. Definitely being surrounded by mountains. Can, I would camp alone a lot, and being around mountains felt terrifying. Thank, thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, thanks.